Hi, we're gonna do glazing today, and we're gonna start with glazing prep. So most of that is done sitting down, number one. What you wanna do is get these burrs and little, this is just a test cup to show different kind of handles. And it was not made to be real pretty, but it has a lot of places that I can show you. Here, for example, if we take a sandpaper or one of these tools and go back and forth, we get some dust that comes off and it smooths that area quite nicely. So now you're not going to see anything coming through the glaze. You also want to smooth the bottom real well and the sides of the bottom. This is what's going to be touching the table. And you don't want that to be rough. You want it to be as smooth as possible. So you can do it with different grits. You can go from something down to, this is a diamond grit. This really makes the bottom smooth. And you can feel there's nothing left on there. As you go around, let your fingers tell you where things have to be smoothed up. Yes, you can see them, and you can see big ones, big pieces of clay that have to come off, but your fingers are going to tell you where it's rough to the touch. Like right here, underneath this handle, there's a rough spot. And if that wasn't smoothed out, you'd feel that every time you put your hand in the cup to drink, which would not be a very pleasant use of the cup. Okay, so this is very rough here. It was an example of how to attach this kind of handle. And so there are big pieces of clay that might even well be scraped off just with a tool. They'll come right off. Some over here. Just scrape some of those off and then go back with a finer scraping. When you're working on handles, be gentle. Even though this is bisque cup, it still can be quite fragile on pieces like handles and pieces that stick up. Okay, so of course in a cup you would want the mouth, where it touches your mouth, to be very smooth, and you go over that several times. So I'm not going to go all the way around. I am going to show you and clean this up because there's really no need to clean it up. It's just for an example. But while I've been doing this, I've been gathering dust. And that's why I had a plate underneath here. And I'm going to put that dust into a little container. So what that is bisqued clay. Okay. Now I see on this cup that I have a little crack where the handle attaches. Can you see that? There's a crack right here. It's kind of hard to see, but in the shadow there, you can see it. Glaze might fill that in and you couldn't see it. It's certainly not deep enough that this handle is going to come off, but I might want to try a fix with a little bit of the glaze. I'm just going to take, so I've taken some of the glaze away from the edge of the barrel of glaze. And so it's quite thick. I don't want it liquid because what I want to do is I want to mix half of this paste with half of the powder and come up with a paste that will hopefully stick in that crack. So the reason you add the clay particles, the bisqued particles, is so that it actually stays in the crack. The reason you add the glaze is so that it melts and goes into that crack. So now I've got a real dry paste. and I am going to push it down into that crack. This is a good tool that happens to have a point on it, and I can really get a good push going down into that crack. So I'm going to round it a little bit, and I do this before I glaze it. So glaze will cover this, and you usually don't see it. What you want to do is make it so that you don't see the crack once it's glazed. So you want it fairly smooth, but it doesn't have to be perfect. So you can't see the crack now, and hopefully that will help. So you just use a little bit of the glaze and a little bit of the powder. Let's see, once this is done, you can either put wax on the bottom now, or you can wait until after you've washed it off. I'm going to go ahead and put wax on. Well, no, I think I'll wash it off first. And when I'm in my studio, I wash it off under the faucet and then let it air dry for a couple of hours. Of course, in a class, you don't have that luxury of time to let it dry. So what we do is we take clean water. I have some water in a bucket here, and just wipe the surface of that piece. And what you're doing, you're wiping off all the dust that you created by sanding down the bisqued clay. So I'm trying not to get it soaking wet. The reason is there will be less glaze that goes into it if the pottery is already wet. So I'm just trying to get off those crumbs, and I'm going to wipe. I already wiped the bottom. I'm wiping the outside, and I'm going to wipe the inside. And as I said, be sure you're using clean water. Don't use water that has a whole bunch of dust already in it, or you'll just be putting dust back on your pot. Okay. Okay, so I feel like that's wiped off pretty good. I would normally go on to my next piece, but I'm going to show you how to put the wax on the bottom. I'm depending on what kind of glaze you're going to use. You want the wax to come up either barely so it doesn't touch the kiln shelf. Since I'm going to probably use clear glaze, that's plenty. That's even less than 1/4 of an inch. If I was going to put a drippy glaze on here, I would want to put the wax all the way up here, because drippy glazes are going to drip down and touch the kiln shelf and stick and never come off. So use a brush. I have my wax in a little smaller container than what it comes in. And I just put it on really as thin as I can. It helps that it's already damp to go on. It doesn't go on in a glomp. And I just use the brush. I'm going to go up as far as I have a 45-degree angle on here. Okay. Bonnie, quit playing with that noisy toy. So you do want to make it fairly smooth all the way around. I have colorant, I have food coloring in my wax so that I can tell where it comes. So I see I think all the places are done. You want to make sure not to drip this on your piece anywhere else. The glaze will not adhere. So this one is ready to glaze. And we'll show that in just a minute. This one, I wanted to just show you, I have, this is my tall skinny birdhouse, and I have already sanded it. And what I want to do now is, it's already bisqued. I could have put my underglaze on before I fired it or after I fired it. But on this particular surface, I want to put on underglaze so that it will go into those cracks that I've made to look like windows. And sometimes you can tell it's just really not going in there. To me, it helps to have the underglaze watered down a little bit so that it's not quite so thick and it will more easily go into the indentations. Because if you're putting it on for this reason, to wipe it off and to just show texture, you want it to go into the lines. Okay, so I'm going to add just a little bit more water. Now it's gone down in there. Okay, now I don't want it all over the surface, so I'm taking a clean sponge, wiping it off. And after I wipe once with that sponge, I want to pick a clean spot to wipe again. If there's still a clean spot, use it. If not, then rinse off your sponge real well in water, so it's clean again. To wipe again. And you just wipe. If you want this to show a little bit here as kind of a gray texture, leave it on there. If not, keep wiping it. Okay, but I am wiping flat so that I'm not pressing in hard to take the underglaze out of those lines. I actually want those lines to be black. That's the whole purpose of me putting it on here. So this is just similar to putting on glaze and wiping it off, but I'm putting on underglaze and wiping it off. And it will make the pot wet. Obviously, see how it's a different color here than here. So after you've done that, you want to wait, let it dry before you glaze it. I'm going to put clear over this so that you've got your pot isn't too wet, and so that it's evenly wet all over. So that's the wipe off method for underglaze, and it really shows texture wonderfully. Okay, I have a couple of plates that I did, and this one cracked pretty badly. And it cracked, you can see it quite well on the underside and on the front. And in fact, you can see through it. So there's not much you can do about that crack. If I try to put the dried bisque and glaze in there, it could melt all the way through and come down on the shelf and stick. So this is kind of a throwaway. But this plate, I have some littler cracks. Hard to see, but they don't go in as far. There's one. And yes, they go through the edge, and you can see them on the back. But I'm going to try and save this piece by the same method that we did with the other one. I'm going to take glaze, and I'm going to take, because this is a different type of clay, I want to make sure that the powder that I add is the same, the powdered bisque is the same clay as what this is, your piece is. So I'm going to mix a little bit of the glaze with some of that powder. If it's just too dry and I have to add water, that's not a problem. I can add water. But usually I just try to make it a real grainy paste. So I'm now taking the bisque, which in this case is porcelain bisque rather than B-mix bisque. And I've mushed it together pretty well into clay. And I'm going to try and push that down into that small crack. And I'm going to try, and it's not sticking. So I think I'm going to have to add a little bit of water on here in order for that to stick at all. I'm going to try and push it down. There, it's stuck a little bit. I'm putting a little more water on it. And I'm going to try putting that on all three sides of the crack that I can see. I'm going to put it on this outside rim, trying to push it in. So I can't see it now. A little water on it to make it stay. And on the back. So I just wanted to show you that this is a crack that is a little bit worse than that one on the handle because of the cup, because it actually was caused by stress on the outside of the pot. But I'm going to fix that, leave that on there and see before I glaze it. I'm going to let this dry. I wouldn't want to dip it in the glaze right now, but I'm going to see if that's going to help those little cracks. Okay. Now I'm going to go around to where the glaze bucket is to show you about glazing the cup. Sorry, lost the picture here for me. Okay. And I'm going to get clean water in this bucket. The last thing I did was I put black slip into that water. So it definitely is no longer clean. Okay, in case I need water, I've got a bucket with water. This cup is going to get glazed on the inside and then the outside. A lot of cups, vases, even bowls, you want a different color inside. Lots of times you want it clear, and that's what I'm going to do here, is glaze the inside with clear. So I've got my glaze down here in a bucket. Very hard to show. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and move my bucket so you can see it a little bit better. You're still not going to be able to see inside the bucket, but you can kind of see the dipping process. And every time before you use a glaze, stir it. It doesn't matter if it's only been 2 minutes. Make sure you stir it, because as soon as you don't stir that glaze, it starts to settle. I just take the stir, put it back on the lid of the hot bucket that the glaze is in. I'm going to take a cup with a spout. Helps a lot if it has a pointy spout. And I'm going to put the glaze in the cup and then pour it back into the pot. But I'm going to turn it as I pour it so that I get glaze all the way around in the cup. And I don't want to hold this with glaze in it for 2 minutes. I'll get a lot of glaze in this cup saturated. So I try to do it fairly quickly. Put some in there, turn it, turn it, turn it, turn it. I had a couple spots that didn't get it, so there I go. I just put a little bit more in. I wait for that to drip out. And I've got the inside completely covered with glaze. Okay. I'm gonna see if I can't pause this Okay. Okay, you may or may not have been able to stop that recording. We should be recording now. And this time, okay, well, I am going to use a tongs. Maybe I'm not in speaker view. Maybe that's the problem. Now we're recording. And I've got to just close this one window that is in my way. Okay, there's the glaze bucket. This time I'm going to glaze a plate. And I have enough glaze in my bucket that I can dip this all the way in. So I'm going to use these tongs, get a nice grip. Don't push as hard as you can. You can actually break this piece if you do. All the way in and all the way out. And let it drip. Let it drip over the bucket. Where there's wax on the back, the wax just makes that glaze wipe bubble right off. If you have a sponge in your hand, well, you still have this in the grips of this tool, you can start wiping, or you can put it down on the table and wipe after it's dry. Okay, we're going to come back to this cup. Now it is, I'm going to do it on the outside, glaze it on the outside, and I'm going to pretend like I'm doing a different color. So I want to go straight in and hit the cup parallel to the top of the glaze. That will create a vacuum and not leave this glaze that when dipping into to go all the way up inside the cup, since I've already glazed that. So I go in and out and wait for it to, so you see it's a, dipping is a fast process. You don't want to leave it in there for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. You'll get way too much glaze on your piece. 1 second in, 1 second out. And now my cup has glaze both inside and out. If I have little, when I put it down, I may have a point here and a point here where I don't have glaze. I'm going to just touch that up when it's dry, not right now, with a little more glaze. Right now, I'm going to try to sit it on the table with the wax touching the table. And it's fun. Have fun glazing. We'll be doing it in a couple of days. Bye.